What do you do when your neighbor has invaded 3 countries in the last 2 decades, is massing troops on your border, and has already stolen 9% of your land once before? If you're Finland, you don't wait for a fourth warning. You shut the door, lock it, weld it shut, and then you build a wall so advanced it can detect a fox moving through a dark forest from 50 kilometers away. On June 4th, Finland made a decision that sent a shockwave through every defense ministry in Europe, and a cold chill through the Kremlin. Every single crossing point along its 1,340-kilometer border with Russia is now sealed, indefinitely. No vehicles, no people, no exceptions. Before we go any further, if geopolitics and real military strategy are what you come here for, hit subscribe right now and tap that bell. Share this video with one person in your contacts who follows world events. And if this kind of deep analysis is what you want more of, the like button is how you tell the algorithm to keep showing it. This channel runs on your support. Now let's talk about what just happened in Northern Europe, and why it matters far beyond Finland's snowy forests. To understand the full weight of this decision, you need to go back, not just a few years, decades, because Finland's relationship with Russia is not written in diplomatic memos, it is written in grief. In November 1939, the Soviet Union launched a full-scale invasion of Finland. The world watched, mostly in silence, as one of the most powerful military forces on Earth threw itself against a small Nordic nation. Finland fought back with astonishing ferocity in what history now calls the Winter War, but courage alone couldn't hold back everything. When the fighting ended, Finland had lost approximately 9% of its entire territory. The region of Karelia, a land of lakes, forests, and centuries of Finnish identity, was stripped away. The city of Viborg, one of Finland's largest, was handed to the Soviets. Roughly 420,000 Finnish citizens were forced to pack whatever they could carry and walk away from their homes, their farms, their churches, their graves. Those people never went back. That wound has never fully healed in Finnish national memory. It sits at the center of how Finland thinks about security, about Russia, and about what it means to be a small country sharing a very long border with a very large and historically aggressive neighbor. Every Finnish defense decision since 1940 has been made in the shadow of that experience, and the decision made on June 4th of this year is no different. The immediate trigger for the border closure wasn't a military attack. It was something subtler and in some ways more disturbing. Over the past several years, Russia began using migrants as a weapon. Finnish border guards started reporting a steady stream of people arriving at crossing points. People who had been brought to the border not by desperation, but by organization. Buses, coordination, timing. The fingerprints of Russia's FSB intelligence service were visible across the operation. The goal wasn't for these people to settle in Finland. The goal was to overwhelm the system, generate headlines, create political chaos, and test how far a European democracy could be pushed before it cracked. Finland watched what happened when that same tactic was used on other European borders. It watched the political instability it caused, the public anger, the internal divisions, and it made a decision. Not gradually, not partially, completely. If Russia wants to use the border as a pressure valve, Finland would remove the valve entirely. But the border closure is only the beginning of the story. What Finland has built along that 1,340-kilometer line goes far beyond closing checkpoints. In strategically selected sections, Finland has constructed a physical barrier reaching 4.5 meters in height. Steel posts, thick wire, but the hardware is almost secondary to what's embedded in it. The fence is lined with thermal imaging sensors that work in total darkness. Autonomous motion detection systems that don't need a human operator watching a screen at every moment. High-powered audio systems capable of issuing warnings across wide distances. Night vision cameras feeding continuous live footage to a command center in Helsinki. This is not a wall in the traditional sense. It is a surveillance network that happens to have a physical barrier attached to it. The system is sensitive enough to register a single animal moving through dense forest at night and immediately alert commanders with location data. What it does to a human infiltration team, or a column of vehicles, goes well beyond detection. Behind the fence, Finland has repositioned significant military assets. Border guard units operating under the Finnish name Rajavartiosto have been equipped with advanced drone systems and thermal surveillance tools. Logistical vehicles, heavy equipment, and military supplies have been pre-positioned at points directly behind the borderline. The message being sent is unmistakable. There is no unguarded stretch. There is no quiet section. Every meter of this border is watched, recorded, and covered by a response force that can be on site faster than any infiltration team could exploit a gap. Finland also made a decision several years ago that now looks extraordinarily prescient. It maintained conscription when many European nations were abandoning it. Today, Finland can mobilize a reserve force of roughly 280,000 trained soldiers within days. For a country of 5.5 million people, that ratio is remarkable. These aren't people who did 1 year of basic training and went home. They undergo recurring exercises, weapons refreshers, and scenario-specific training. When Finnish officials talk about the border being defended, they're not speaking theoretically. They're describing a population that has been systematically prepared for exactly this moment. And then there's NATO. Finland formally joined the alliance in April 2023, ending decades of official neutrality in a move that was itself a direct response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That membership transformed the Finnish border from a national defense line into NATO's longest land border with Russia. Approximately 1,340 kilometers of NATO territory now runs directly adjacent to Russian territory in the north. That is not a line Russia can probe without triggering the alliance's collective defense commitment. Finland is no longer defending alone. Under NATO's Forward Land Forces integration framework, multinational troops have been deployed on Finnish soil. Allied air patrols operate over Finnish airspace. Intelligence sharing has deepened to a level that would have been unthinkable during the Cold War era of Finnish neutrality. The border closure doesn't just reflect Finland's own determination, it reflects the collective will of an alliance that has grown significantly stronger and significantly more motivated since 2022. Now let's move to the part of this story that is rarely discussed as clearly as it deserves to be. What this actually does to Russia's military position in the Northwest. Russia has been rebuilding its military presence in the Leningrad military district for years. This is the command structure responsible for Russia's northwestern axis, the direction that points toward Finland, the Baltic states, and ultimately toward the heart of Europe. Within this district, Russia has been constructing new facilities, expanding garrisons, and preparing what analysts believe is a significant long-term military buildup. The centerpiece of this effort is a new base near Petrozavodsk, approximately 160 kilometers from the Finnish border. This facility is being prepared for the newly formed 44th Army Corps, with a projected capacity of around 15,000 soldiers. Tent camps are going up, logistics depots are being built, supply lines are being routed. On paper, it looks like a serious force in development. But here's the problem that Finland's border closure creates for all of it. A military base only has strategic value if it can project power beyond its walls. Troops sitting inside a garrison that cannot move west have limited operational utility against the direction they were presumably positioned to threaten. The 44th Corps at Petrozavodsk was built with the implicit assumption that the border, or at least some version of it, would remain usable. Crossings could be probed, personnel could move through under various pretexts, intelligence could be gathered using the permeability that an open border provides. That calculation is now gone. The base still exists, but its reach has been amputated. Those logistics depots are coordinates on a NATO surveillance map, not functional forward operating positions. The tent camps are visible to Finnish and NATO reconnaissance systems around the clock. The troops that fill them are not threatening anything on the other side of the border. They are contained. Move further north and the picture gets even more strategically significant. The Murmansk region, sitting on the Kola Peninsula above the Arctic Circle, is arguably the single most sensitive piece of Russian military real estate on Earth. It houses the largest concentration of nuclear weapons anywhere in the world. It is home to Russia's northern fleet, including the nuclear-powered submarines that form a critical component of Russia's second strike nuclear capability. Russia's entire Arctic strategy runs through this peninsula, and now it sits exposed on its western flank. With the Finnish border sealed and Finnish surveillance systems monitoring that entire corridor, Russia's ability to use the Northwest as a staging ground for hybrid operations or intelligence activities toward NATO territory has been severely degraded. The Kola Peninsula used to feel insulated, far from NATO, operating behind a buffer of geography and border permeability. That buffer is gone. St. Petersburg, Russia's second-largest city, now sits within the theoretical range of NATO artillery and missile systems in a way that it could not be meaningfully threatened before Finland joined the alliance. Putin's Northwest strategy, built on the assumption that Finland would remain neutral and the border would remain fluid, has been structurally invalidated. This is a good moment to pause, because if you're finding this analysis genuinely useful, I want you to do something right now. Go to the comments section and drop your answer to this question. Do you think Russia will attempt a hybrid countermove in the Arctic within the next 12 months, or will it stay quiet? I read every comment. The best answers will be featured, and while you're down there, make sure you're subscribed because the follow-up to this video is already being built. Let's talk about the wider Nordic picture, because Finland's decision didn't happen in isolation. It landed inside a region that was already transforming. Sweden finalized its own NATO membership in March 2024, ending more than 2 centuries of military non-alignment. That's not a minor footnote. Sweden's military-industrial capacity, its geographic position in the Baltic Sea, and its air force are all now formally integrated into NATO's defense architecture. The island of Gotland, sitting in the middle of the Baltic Sea like a cork in a bottle, has been remilitarized with air defense systems and armor. U.S. strategic bombers have landed at Swedish air bases in the north. The message to Moscow from Stockholm is now the same as the message from Helsinki. The era of neutrality is over. Norway, which was already a NATO founding member, has moved in parallel. The Bardufoss air base, which had been significantly drawn down, has been reactivated and upgraded. Advanced F-35 fighters are now housed in hardened, mountain-embedded hangars that would survive a first strike. A new NATO Air Command Center in Bodø now coordinates the entire northern European airspace from a single hub. British forces have committed to doubling their special operations presence in Norway over a 3-year timeline. These countries have also done something that has received too little attention in most coverage of this story. They have built a physical logistics corridor across the top of Europe. Military supplies arriving at Norwegian deep-water ports on the Atlantic coast can now move overland through Sweden and reach Finland's eastern defense lines without touching the Baltic Sea at all. The Baltic is contested. Russian submarines operate there. Surface vessels are trackable but vulnerable. This overland route bypasses all of that. It means NATO can supply its Nordic front through a route that Russia cannot credibly interdict without triggering a direct conflict with 3 NATO members simultaneously. The formal name for the Nordic Security Integration Framework is Fortress Nordic. Under the umbrella of the Nordic Defense Cooperation, NORDEFCO, these nations have moved from coordination to genuine military integration. Common weapons systems are being adopted. Sweden, Norway, and Finland are standardizing on shared armored vehicle platforms, including the CV-90 infantry fighting vehicle and next-generation wheeled personnel carriers. When armies use the same vehicles, they can use the same spare parts, the same mechanics, the same ammunition. Interoperability becomes seamless. That matters enormously when planning a joint defense of a continuous territorial line. What Putin's military planners are looking at in the Northwest is now profoundly different from what they were looking at 3 years ago. 3 years ago, Finland was neutral. Sweden was neutral. The border was open. Gotland was lightly defended. Norwegian bases were partly dormant. There was running room, geographic, political, and psychological. That running room has been systematically closed. And Finland's border decision is the final physical lock on a door that has been swinging shut for 2 years. Now, Russia will not simply accept this situation quietly. That needs to be said clearly, because understanding Russia's likely responses is as important as understanding what Finland has done. The most obvious limitation on Russian action right now is Ukraine. The war has consumed an enormous portion of Russia's most capable conventional military assets. Experienced officers, modern armor, precision munitions, all of it has been burning up in eastern Ukraine at a rate that Russia's defense industry is struggling to replace. Launching a new conventional military operation in the northwest while the southeastern front remains active and demanding is not a realistic near-term option. Moscow knows this, NATO knows this, and Finland is exploiting that window deliberately. But Russia has other tools. The undersea cable networks running through the Baltic and North Sea are critical infrastructure carrying data, financial transactions, and communications for all of Northern Europe. Russian naval activity, particularly using vessels from its so-called shadow fleet, ships that appear on radar as civilian cargo carriers but carry surveillance and sabotage equipment, has already been linked to cable disruptions in the region. This is deniable. It is difficult to attribute with legal certainty, and it doesn't require the kind of military commitment that a conventional operation would demand. Russia will almost certainly intensify its electronic warfare operations against Finland and Sweden. GPS, jamming in the region, which disrupts civilian aviation, confuses navigation systems, and tests the resilience of digital infrastructure, has already been documented on multiple occasions. Cyber attacks targeting hospitals, power grids, banking systems, and government databases are a standard tool in Russia's hybrid playbook and one that Finland has been preparing defenses against for years. But preparation and immunity are not the same thing. The Arctic is another space where Russia still holds meaningful cards. Its nuclear submarine activity in the Barents Sea and the broader Arctic Ocean cannot be blocked by Finland's land border. The Northern Sea Route, which Russia increasingly uses to project presence and influence toward Asia, gives Moscow a strategic corridor that runs through international waters above Norway and Finland entirely. Russia has been quietly militarizing its Arctic outposts for years, embedding radar systems and intelligence equipment on what it presents as scientific or civilian icebreaker vessels. The Svalbard Archipelago, a Norwegian territory in the high Arctic with a complicated legal status under a century-old treaty, is another potential pressure point. Russia maintains a small civilian presence there. It has historically tested Norwegian reactions in this space. Under increased pressure elsewhere, it may look to Svalbard as a place where it can manufacture a low-level confrontation that tests NATO's Article 5 reflex without triggering a full military response. Nuclear signaling is also on the table. Russia has used it throughout the Ukraine conflict to manage escalation, and the expiration of the New START arms reduction treaty has removed one of the last formal constraints on strategic nuclear deployments. Increasing the number or visibility of nuclear-capable systems on the Kola Peninsula serves a dual purpose. It is a military posture and a psychological message simultaneously. None of these options give Russia back what it has lost strategically. Jamming GPS doesn't reopen the Finnish border. Submarine patrols don't restore the permeability that made Finland's border valuable to Moscow's hybrid operations. Cyber attacks generate disruption, not territory. The structural shift that has occurred in Northern Europe cannot be reversed through the asymmetric tools Russia is likely to deploy. What those tools can do is impose costs, sustain pressure, and signal that Moscow has not accepted the new reality as permanent. That is different from actually changing the reality. And here is the thing about Finland that Russia's strategists may be misreading. Even now, Finland accepted enormous economic costs with this decision. The border towns that depended on Russian trade and cross-border commerce have seen that income disappear. Tourism revenue is gone. Businesses that operated for decades in that ecosystem have had to adapt or close. The Finnish government made a deliberate calculation. Economic pain in the short term is survivable. Another scenario like 1939 is not. There is a clarity to that reasoning that is rare in modern democratic politics, where economic arguments almost always outweigh security concerns until the security threat becomes impossible to ignore. Finland ignored nothing. It has been watching Russia with clear eyes since the Winter War, through the Cold War, through the 1990s, through Georgia in 2008, through Crimea in 2014, and through Ukraine in 2022. Every time the world suggested that Russia had changed, Finland remained cautious. Every time European capitals talked about engagement and partnership and normalized relations, Helsinki kept its reserve army funded and its defense doctrine sharp. History has validated that caution more times than Finland would have preferred. What Finland has built along its eastern border is not just a fence, not just a military deployment, not just a NATO integration. It is the physical embodiment of a lesson learned the hardest possible way. That a border with Russia is not a line on a map that both sides agree to respect. It is a line that must be defended technically, militarily, politically, and psychologically every single day. Russia is now looking at a border it cannot use for infiltration, cannot use for hybrid pressure, cannot use for intelligence operations the way it once could. The military formations being built to its northwest are watched continuously by systems they cannot blind and cannot destroy without triggering a war they cannot afford while Ukraine continues to bleed them. The nuclear installations on the Kola Peninsula, once insulated by geography and Finland's neutrality, now sit in the surveillance shadow of a hostile alliance. The Northern Front, which Russia may have once imagined as a potential avenue of pressure or expansion, has become the front where Russia is most exposed, most isolated, and most contained. Europe spent decades believing that openness, trade, and dialogue would moderate Russian behavior. Finland spent those same decades building a military that could respond when that theory failed. It has now failed comprehensively enough that even the most optimistic European governments can no longer pretend otherwise. And Finland, small, cold, quiet, deeply scarred by history, has become the country that showed the rest of the continent what realistic security policy actually looks like. The 1,340-kilometer border is sealed. The wall is built. The sensors are active. The troops are positioned. The alliance is unified. And Putin, who built his strategic vision for the Northwest on a foundation of Finnish neutrality and border permeability, is locked out, not just of Finland, but of the entire Northern European strategic space he once believed he could shape. That is what happened on June 4th. It didn't make the front page of every newspaper. It didn't generate the kind of coverage that explosions and offensives do. But in terms of the long arc of European security, in terms of what the map of this continent will look like in 20 years, it may matter more than 100 battlefield updates. Finland closed a door, and it did it with the quiet, absolute certainty of a people who remember exactly what happens when that door is left open. If this video reshaped how you see what's happening in Northern Europe right now, here's the most powerful thing you can do. Don't just like it. Share it somewhere. A group chat, a forum, a conversation you've been having with someone who doesn't quite understand why Finland and Sweden joining NATO actually matters. This analysis took serious work to put together, and the only way it reaches the people who need it is if you send it there, share it, and stay subscribed, because the next piece of this story is already coming. Script data. Finland sealed all 8 crossing points along its 1,340-kilometer border with Russia on June 4th, making it the longest sealed land border between a NATO member and Russia in history. During the 1939 Winter War, the Soviet Union occupied approximately 9% of Finnish territory, including Karelia and Vyborg, forcing around 420,000 Finnish citizens to permanently abandon their homes and relocate. Russia used FSB-coordinated migrant pressure tactics along the Finnish border as a hybrid destabilization tool, with organized groups being bused to crossing points to overwhelm Finnish administrative and political systems. Finland's border fence reaches 4.5 meters in height and is equipped with thermal imaging sensors, autonomous motion detectors, night vision cameras, and high-powered audio systems feeding live data to a command center in Helsinki. Finland maintains a reserve military force of approximately 280,000 trained soldiers who undergo recurring exercises, making it one of the highest per capita military readiness ratios in Europe. Russia's 44th Army Corps facility near Petrozavodsk, approximately 160 kilometers from the Finnish border and designed for 15,000 soldiers, has lost most of its strategic value because the border it was positioned to exploit is now sealed and under continuous NATO surveillance. The Kola Peninsula in the Murmansk region hosts the largest concentration of nuclear weapons in the world and houses Russia's Northern Fleet nuclear submarines, both of which now sit exposed on their western flank following Finland's NATO membership and border closure. Finland, Sweden, and Norway have built an overland military logistics corridor from Atlantic deep-water ports through Sweden to Finland's eastern defense lines, bypassing the contested Baltic Sea entirely. Under the Fortress Nordic Framework and NORDFKO cooperation, Nordic nations have standardized military equipment, including CV-90 infantry fighting vehicles and next-generation wheeled armored personnel carriers to achieve seamless operational interoperability. Russia's most likely asymmetric responses include undersea cable sabotage via shadow fleet vessels, GPS jamming of civilian aviation, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, Arctic military signaling, and potential pressure operations near Norway's Svalbard archipelago.